Welcome to Season 2 of the Project Hope podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer. As many of you know, I am a cult survivor myself. For anyone interested, you can hear the story of how I got in and how I got out in Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. The beginning of this year, 2023, actually marks my 11 years of being out, and I am so super grateful for the ways my life has unfolded since. I now work with survivors of coercive control, and I'm going to take a moment here to define this term, as one of my heart's desires is to help society at large better understand coercive control in cases that are not just culty, but across the globe I view coercive control as a social issue. It's at the heart of cases where women and girls are murdered. We find coercive control in one-to-one relationships that are intimate, in gangs, sex trafficking, and cults of all types. I have a master's in the psychology of coercive control, and I'm just beginning a new element of my career as an expert witness for legal cases that involve coercive control. As a certified trauma professional, I work with survivors. I'm especially excited to be offering a group survivor program for cult and religious abuse recovery. So this is not a support group, but rather a healing program. It's based on my certification in the incredible work of Dr. Jilly Jenkinson, who gathered decades of research on survivors to create a body of work that I would consider to be the most comprehensive and flexible approach I've come across in this field. We will meet every other week for 6 months, and registration will open in February of 2023 for those interested. Lastly, I am also a research associate at Salford University and explore topics related to coercive control. So let's jump back into a basic understanding of coercive control before I introduce the next episode. Coercive control is a strategic pattern of behavior designed to exploit, control, create dependency, and dominate. The victim's everyday existence is micromanaged, and their space for action, as well as potential as a human being, is limited and controlled by the abuser. Initially, the victim may be drawn into the relationship with love bombing and charm. Then gaslighting, isolation, economic control, and financial abuse can take place alongside rules and regulations that are gradually introduced over time and change at the whim of the abuser. The victim knows there are consequences if rules are broken, and they apply to the victim rather than the perpetrator, creating a double standard. Over time, coercively controlling behavior erodes the victim's sense of self, their confidence, self-esteem, agency, and autonomy. The abuser creates an unreal world of contradiction, confusion, and fear. It may be helpful to know that 51% of victims do not even know that they are being abused, manipulated, and controlled. Coercive control correlates significantly to serious harm, and in many cases, in intimate partner violence, it precedes homicide. These can be difficult topics to grapple with, so I truly hope that this podcast helps to protect you and those you love with helpful voices and information. If you appreciate the podcast, please let us know by subscribing and comment with kindness. And always think critically, trust your intuition, and be free. Please always be aware when listening to the Project Hope podcast that content may be triggering, and this episode contains references to sexual abuse, so please take care as you do listen. I understand this content can be challenging, and that is the nature of abuse. It's always heartbreaking to hear about people harming others. Amanda's story is harrowing. She's in the middle of it and courageously approached me to see if the Project Hope podcast might be an appropriate forum for her to expose her former church, known as Revival for Christ Club in Moore, Oklahoma. The congregation leader is Timothy Vanover and his wife Jennifer Vanover. So after 35 years, Amanda is not just entering into a whistleblowing role, which can be very vulnerable, but she's also with us as a cult survivor, having been raised in this group. Her main motivation for exposing this group is something many of you will relate to. Her daughter is being separated from her. In this episode, you will hear about Amanda's experience growing up in this church and the layers of coercive control that are happening. As you listen, you might pay particular attention to areas of power and control that Amanda speaks to. For example, from the outside, it may seem generous and even caring that Timothy at times pays the bills of his congregants. When we look at the underbelly of this act, the power and control are glaring. He has trapped the most devoted so that they work for him, receiving little compensation in return. So little, in fact, that at times they cannot pay for basic bills. He then steps in to save, to help with the situation that he created, so people remain dependent and trapped in one of the cycles of coercive, controlling financial abuse. She shares the intimate pain of losing her mother and her oldest daughter. Although this story exposes deep pain, these life-changing events are also moving Amanda into a place of greater empowerment. She is very aware that her story has just begun, that it does not end here. So, as she enters into the unknown of what might transpire as this information gets out, she is also inspired to help stop the destruction of families, as well as the religious abuse that is so often unseen or under the surface. As I get to know Amanda, I feel her strong spirit and desire to help. I noted more than once that Amanda acknowledged that if her story could help just one person, it was worth putting out. I'd personally like to acknowledge Amanda as a woman, daughter, and mother who has taken her pain and used it as fuel to fight with love for those she cares about, as she risks all the bad that will be spoken about her on top of what's already been done to her, much of which you will hear as you dive into this episode. As always, thanks for listening. So welcome, Amanda Redwine, to the Project Hope podcast. It's a total delight and pleasure to welcome you here today.
Hi, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so Amanda, I know we had discussed, the audience will hear a little bit of an introduction to you prior to this, but I thought we would just begin by kind of grounding the audience a little bit into your sort of early childhood, your entry into this particular church, and kind of how that all happened. Maybe a little bit also about sort of the construct or configuration of your family as well.
Okay. Well, my mom was a mother of, she was a single mom of me and my brother. I was 3, my brother was 1. And she had come into this church and believed that God had brought her there. And we spent my whole life there growing up. She got very involved. She was young. And so a lot of the people of the church kind of had a hand in raising my brother and I. Members of the congregation, like the inner people, I guess, was you would say. She was part of an MC program, which was called Ministers Candidates. They were like the people that were training to be ministers, the up and coming ministers that have the high dedication and devotion. They're set to a higher standard than the rest of the congregation. At this time in my childhood, they lived as roommates generally. Like all of the men MCs were single, and they lived above the church. They had like rooms up above the church at one point. And then the women lived in households. And so we lived with 3 to 6 roommates probably at all times growing up. Mm-hmm. And I probably went to every school in my little town and more. And from elementary to junior high and high school, we moved. And I can remember having 6 roommates at a time living with us. And we all went to church together.
And may I ask, was your mother also in the same house as you, or in the same room, or what was the
at times we would be my mother and I would share a room. At times we all 3 would share a room. There was times where my brother generally, as we got older, had to have his own room because he was a boy, but everybody else shared rooms. So I don't think I had my own room ever growing up. It was always with my mom normally, because we had like several roommates. There wasn't enough room.
Yeah. And so did you feel, was there kind of a closeness with your mother? And did you feel like you got the experience of kind of being parented by her? Or was it more kind of communal that everybody's parenting the kids?
It was communal. Most definitely. My mom, Timothy dictated everything. For the MCs. And so they had rules and things they had to go by. They had curfews. They used to have to turn in their paychecks to him, and he would tell them how much, that they were getting back out of their paycheck. Oh. And they would say that they were handling their finances. And 3 of the ministers handled all of the MCs' budgets, basically. And even Timothy's ex-wife, Shelley, who was married to him at the time, would tell him, because I'd spoke to her after all of this. And she would be like, I would tell him, Tim, you can't do that to these people. Like, they're barely making it by. She would say people would turn in like $600 checks, and they would get like $60 back out of their check. Wow. And he would say, you don't know what it takes to run a ministry and the finances and how much money we need. And she would just, she said it would cause a fight. She'd walk away. And Shelley really never had an understanding for the way he handled things. But when you're the minister's wife and that's kind of your place, you just, I guess, keep going about your business.
Right. So, Amanda, I know just to ground the audience in that Tim or Timothy is the leader of the church.
Yes. Timothy Vanover is, yes. And he was married to Shelley Vanover for 20 years. And he then divorced her and married his nanny, who was their live-in nanny for 20 years and took care of his kids. Went on their vacations with them, lived in their home, and was also his personal masseuse.
Okay.
So, and then now she is Jennifer Vanover, Timothy Vanover's new wife.
Okay.
And the whole church supported this. And we shunned the ex-wife, made her feel unwanted. She was no longer a woman of God. She hadn't been one for a while, is what they would say. And just talked all kinds of terrible things about her. And the lady, she lost everything. I mean, her whole life of 20 years, completely gone, turned her twins against her, wouldn't let them, completely manipulated them. They didn't speak to her for years. Just now are they even beginning to hardly talk and have a relationship.
Oh, Amanda. Yeah.
And it's because they no longer go to that church anymore.
Yeah. What a heartbreak. And of course, so this is part of this church legacy. And yes. We see this so often in unhealthy church environments where there are these schisms that are created within the families and between family members. Okay, so you and your brother end up, so your mother is basically employed by the church.
Yeah, with no money.
With no money, right. Right.
So she worked a full-time job. So she worked a full-time job and took, care of me and my brother and lived with the roommates and all of that. But living with 6 roommates, she would wonder why we struggled and never had any money to go do anything. Because back in that day, rent couldn't have been that much money, We're talking $600-700 probably. And you've got 6 roommates to pitch in on bills, and you work, for the state, you make decent money. And we would go without, we would school clothes were very iffy, and it was Walmart. We didn't get the cool stuff, and it just sucked. It sucked to have my whole life. I remember as a kid saying, I just want my mom. Like, I hated the church when I got older because they took her from me all the time. It was always what the church wanted. Every time Tim called or Pastor Chris would call and needed her for a fundraiser or to go do something or to take care of something, whatever we had planned was done. And it was taking care of whatever Tim needed. And the MCs were set to a higher dedication, like I said. So we were there before service, before get-togethers cleaning, and after services and after get-togethers cleaning, and being the kid of an MC, you were there too. And that was your life too. It was 7 days a week, church, Sunday, Monday, or Sundays, Tuesdays, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Tuesdays and Thursdays is what we used to have church. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays, there was always some kind of ministry operation, like spread the word to invite people out to church. We'd go pass out flyers, or nursing home team. And then the weekends were devoted to fundraising, candy sales, burger fries, highway alerts, you name it. And that was my whole life.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And this church is located in Moore, Oklahoma?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're actually associated with the Yellow Rose Dinner Theater, which is a pretty well-known dinner theater around the area. But little do people know is that all of these actors and actresses and waiters and people that work in the kitchen and in the box office, they're all volunteers. And even the cook at Tops gets paid like $400 something a week, maybe. And that's her full-time job.
Wow.
And she can't go work anywhere else.
So that facility is actually owned by the church and employed by church employee or church work. Church
employed really would be the word, because you would pay people to be employed. Right. He has volunteers, and yes, it is all members of the congregation. Now they're going to hurt quite a bit because they just lost some very prominent members of the dinner theater. One of the guys that did, Dean Martin, who was very prevalent in the dinner theater with a lot of our shows, has recently left as well. Yeah. And he and his whole family. And they were actually kind of dismissed from the church because they associated with someone Tim did not like. And actually the minister that he dismissed on social media, which kind of started this whole ball rolling when I spoke out initially.
Okay. So as we get to that, so I'll remember that as kind of a touch point. Give us a little bit of the evolution of kind of what happens, Amanda, kind of inside of you and in your inner world as you're growing up in this church, and kind of what was happening. I know you've shared with me that there were, just moments, even as a young person, where you were not liking kind of what was going on. And obviously you spoke to, feeling that your mom was being taken all the time, which of course is another, signature red flag for unhealthy church environments, right? Where the leadership is really, everything is designed to serve the church or the leader, and at the disservice to the individuals who are actually in the church and devoted to it. So somebody like your mother, where actually her children need her, and that relationship is important and needs fostering. So
they were very much involved in that.
Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of one of the areas that you were noticing as you were growing up, and give us a little bit of how the sort of schism began for you of not being totally on board with everything going on there.
Well, I think just growing up, the roommates and all of that really never, I guess, caught my attention. We just lived with roommates. It was kind of normal, I guess. And everything I was taught seemed to be normal to me. But whenever I was 13 years old and I was raped, and my mom supported me when it very first happened. She was there, like when she came home, she was a mom for a little bit. And then Tim got word of it and somehow had made it out to be that maybe I had done something to bring it upon myself, or basically that it wasn't really real, or whatever the case may have been, it wasn't that they were there for me or they were concerned, or it was swept underneath the rug and not ever talked about it again, as if nothing ever happened. Oh. And that probably was my breaking point at that time, because I needed someone more than ever then. And it's had an effect on my whole life with my relationships. Intimacy has never been a thing for me. I could really care less for it. And I believe that goes all the way back to unresolved issues of, I never got to deal with it. I never got counseling. We didn't talk about it. And I honestly, for the longest time, thought maybe I did bring it on myself. Maybe I did something to cause this. And so I didn't deal with it. But that was probably when it very first happened. And then it was just, Tim lives a very luxurious life, should I say. He lived in a $350,000+ house out on land with horses, an underground pool, had a nice truck, and they have a Camaro and a Harley and a boat. And the people in his ministry literally live paycheck to paycheck, barely getting by, with roommates, carpooling back and forth. And you're here taking second offerings all the time and taking pledges for their birthdays. Our pastor will stand up every year and ask the congregation to take a $150 pledge for their birthdays, which to these people, a pledge is a promise to God to keep. And so and if you don't go stand up in front of the altar to take this pledge, they see all the people that didn't take the pledge. So, and that if you are sitting in the pew and you're not pledging to these people's birthday, they're looking at you and judging you and thinking some type of thing, especially if you are an MIT or part of the inner circle. I've known people literally spending their electric money to pay a pledge because they didn't have it to give, but they had to take the pledge. My mom being one, for example, and I never had an understanding for it. I would get so angry. And then it was all the time that we had to devote to the church. And then it became, why couldn't I have friends outside the church? I couldn't go hang out with anybody from school. My mom took me out my 11th grade year, beginning of my 11th grade year, and I got homeschooled, and just when I got my GED, because I should have finished school and I could have probably graduated and went to college and had scholarships and everything else. I was really smart.
Yeah.
And that was another thing, is they discouraged college to a lot of the people here. And this is what has, over the course of time, I left when I was 18, and I got married. I moved away. I had my daughter. I came back, and it was always home to me because it's all that I've known growing up. And I won't lie and say that I haven't learned good things from them, that I didn't get a relationship from God from them, because I do know him. But at the same time, there was a lot of detrimental things that happened along the way. My daughter was molested by a boy at the church when she was 3. And I reported it. And when I said I was going to file a VPO against him, Tim told me he would not honor the VPO, that we would just have to not come if we didn't want to see him. Oh. And that's because his stepmother and his father, she's the cook of our dinner theater. So she is a very important person and has been around since the very beginning of the ministry. So he wasn't going to ask them, who pay money and are of value to him, to not come, for me and my daughter to be able to come. Because I was kind of like the black sheep. I've always been kind of mouthy. There's probably not anybody up there that didn't really truly know how I felt about this man. I've never cared for him. We share the same birthday my whole life, April 23rd. I've had to celebrate this birthday and share my birthday parties and be the side showpiece over here to his birthday extravaganzas. And it was just, every time he would make sure he came over and told me that he loved me, and make a little short, like, oh, Amanda's got to share a birthday with me. That stinks. And to have to share with the apostle. And it did stink really bad. And you really didn't give two craps, truly. And I could tell he was just fake. And it was just, I never got a good vibe. He was just ick. And I can remember looking back thinking so many times, I just wanted to be loved by him. I just wanted him to like me like he liked the other youth, because I was kind of the outside. Although my mom was an MC, and we were very involved and on the inner circle, it was as though he wished I wouldn't have had to been with my mom. And I think that my mom probably got some kind of mistreatment for having me and my brother, not mistreatment, but not privileged to as much as others were, because she was the mother of Amanda, but my mom has stayed very dedicated her whole life to this man, and she won't waver. She's very, steadfast in her belief, and that this is where God's called her to be. And I have no understanding how God could ever be involved with a mom not wanting to be a part of her daughter's life, because I don't agree with your church, because I don't agree with the pain and all of the orchestration of marriages and divorces. He has told people to get married. And for the longest time, he was said that him and his wife were married by the Spirit of God, and God joined their hearts together, and they went out in the Spirit with the Holy Ghost and all of that, to the point where we had several other couples of our congregation get married the same way in the Spirit of God, going by they're holding hands during praise, and God falls on them and joins their hearts together. And that was because, that was God marrying. But yet 20 years later, God's changed his mind, and it's time for you to marry your nanny that was living in your house this whole time. I don't think so. And then before that, he was married to another lady of his congregation. So Jennifer would actually make the third wife.
Yeah. Something that strikes me, Amanda, in receiving your story is there's something about that really significant moment of being violated, which I am so sorry that happened. But even more so, to then have such an incredibly confusing and dismissive experience of having your mother, who was present with you initially. It's like we talk about this in terms of recovery work, like our authentic identity that is truly who we are, without the beliefs and messages that we've kind of taken in, that the part that's truly us, that comes forth at different times, even amidst, a whole environment that is structured to maintain some sort of status quo, right? But what's interesting to me about this moment is I would call that moment for your mother one of those moments where her authentic identity arises. And she goes, I am my daughter's mother. And here I allow myself to love and give fully, and that she gave to you in the way she would be moved to give to you. And then Timothy comes in, and that love and the tenderness and the reaction to you that should have been given was taken away. And from that moment on, it sounds to me like it's sort of like the wool was removed, and you were able to see things that maybe other people couldn't see, because you had this very distinct tip off that something's very wrong. That
how could somebody alter your mother's opinion and love? And, who has that much power?
Yeah. Well, and this is where these, what happens in these dynamics is so hard to explain, because it's so complex and it's so layered. And there's a whole series of tactics of manipulation and influence that are working in these environments that honestly, when we're in it, we don't even know. We can't even see that. So it's really hard, and that's that, like kind of cognitive dissonance between trying to reconcile, like something feels really wrong, but everything on the outside and everybody in the entire group all seems to be going along. So, that is incredibly confusing. And that's part of that group dynamic that really is a powerful force, when everybody is kind of on that same program of the belief system.
It is, because I can remember just probably 4 or 5 months ago, before all this happened, I was sitting on the back pew with my former youth pastor, who was a minister there, but was like a second dad and the godparent to my children, and someone I could tell everything and anything to, and didn't feel judged, or, like I trusted him a lot. And I, just felt like I could tell him anything. And I remember sitting there and I told him, Pop, I don't understand. Like, you seem to have like a good head on your shoulders. You got a backbone, you got an opinion, like you're not easily manipulated. Why are you here? Like, how do you stay here? Yeah. And he'd be like, Amanda, the presence of God is here. And just, tell me, because you see the anointing flow, you see the word that comes forth here, you see this. And yeah, I guess, because it's all I've seen. That's all I know. But then at the same time, looking in from it now, where's any fruit been produced in the 20, 30 years I've been here? My mom has been striving to be a minister for 30 years and still not a minister, still sitting on the same pew, working an 8 to 5 job, barely making it, living with roommates 30 years later. Wow. And same with a whole lot of the other ones. One of the roommates she's living with now was a roommate when I was a child. The same lady. Yeah. Just different kids in the household now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right. So it's just crazy because you say that it's in the fruit, of things that you can see. And there has been no fruit produced. We went from having ministries and outreach teams like nursing home and things like that to having nothing but our dinner theater, because that was completely profitable to him. You have a business that just employs volunteers. You pay for your food and that's it. And you're charging anywhere from $35 to $100 a ticket per person.
Yeah. Well, and that may be an angle also in terms of kind of whistleblowing, that there may be some angle there about labor laws.
They have been reported to the labor board because of having children waitressing underage. And so, because my daughter waitresses there, she is 17, but I mean, she works weekends there, like every weekend. That's things that we're starting to kind of look into. They haven't filed taxes since 2016. Oh, wow. And so they've lost their 501c3 status. So they are no longer a nonprofit organization. They've lost it due to not turning in tax records.
Wow.
And so, after everything kind of with this VPO, all this stuff going on, I'm going to continue to keep pursuing. The pastor of the church, the associate pastor, owns a gambling business on the side. And that's what he does, is poker gambling. And they have poker tournaments at the church, which I don't know many churches that allow gambling in their house of God, but hey. And he's filed fraudulent papers on his house because he bought a house. And the only salary that he has is the church's. And it is not enough to afford a $350,000 house. And the people that helped falsify the information haven't come out to speak out forward because it'll get them in trouble too. Yeah. But I know the people that actually helped do the documents on his house. And so we're going to continue to try to pursue, because there's so much more to this. This is just the opening of it. This is the first time Timothy has ever been exposed or put out there for other people to see. And obviously at this point, it's really caused, and that was truly, I didn't even believe my church was a cult growing up my whole life. We were different. We loved each other. We were family. It was all I knew. It wasn't until they turned my daughter and my mom against me, and they tried to hide my daughter from me. And going through all of this, helping my mom try to fight me for guardianship of my 17-year-old child. And Lord God knows I've done worse things than come against a man of a church. And she never has fought me for guardianship of my daughter. And because I told her I was going to take Zoe out of it and leave, she filed for guardianship. They hid my daughter during the time appointing, waited up until we went to court. They sent her to stay with a member of the church, so I couldn't even find her. I couldn't talk to her. Her first birthday in 17 years. I didn't get to speak to her on. I didn't get to see her. And that, at the end of the day, is the reason why this has all happened. Right. Because the initial post of me just kind of losing it for a second was going to be done at that. It was just, I couldn't believe the audacity of these people to be so blinded when it's in black and white in your face, and y'all still go along with this man. And so
this was an actual Facebook post that caused some controversy because people in the church saw what you posted. So share with us a little bit about.
So in May, it was the week after Mother's Day, actually. I had just got a happy Mother's Day for my daughter and my mom. They were at a revival in Truman, Arkansas. And apparently there was a whole lot of discussion while in Truman with the people that were down there. And when they came back, Tim made a post that said he was just like, we want to wish Chuck the best of luck, which, a little backstory, Chuck has been an affiliate of our church for about 20 years or so. and we've known him for quite some time. He's from Florida, very awesome minister. We've all loved him, was probably one of our favorite affiliates. Recently, Tim had moved, him and his wife, here to Oklahoma to start their own church eventually. And so they were going to stay. He became a minister, a part of our ministry team at our church. And him and his wife, were helping out with our ministry. And I guess somewhere along the way, Chuck probably ruffled some feathers or didn't do things that Tim liked, because Tim made a post saying that he was wishing Chuck and Sonia the best on their future with their new church. We're so excited to announce that they are being released to go open their church and blah, 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 blah. And Chuck McSweeney, the gentleman he's talking about, comments on this post and says, "Hey, Apostle, I'm not really sure what you're talking about. This is the first time hearing of this. I guess we are being pushed out of the church. Thank you for everything." And, kept it really nice, but also called him out.
Wow.
And I was just like, jaw to the floor, couldn't believe this man called Timothy out, because people have called him out in the past, but it's been like members of the church. Nobody with, no one prominent enough to be able to validate it, I guess, to make it worth oh, wow, Chuck called him out, Yeah. And then the members that did call him out got silenced, really quickly after that, because it was just one person. And that's why I knew I could never come against them like that, because I wouldn't be able to go to church and see my family. And that is my mom's life. That's where they're at 7 days a week. And so if I want to see them, that's generally where I see them at, is at church, a church function, get together, something. And so that's why I always continue to stay a part of the church, but I wasn't a dedicated member, not on the inside. I was a 2 Sundays a month kind of person in the end, just to be there with my family, or Christmas services, or plays that my daughter was in, or times that my daughter or my mom was preaching, I'd be there to support. And Zoe is very active in the ministry, and she has got an amazing love for God, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I hate feeling like I'm trying to take any of that away from her or hinder her, because right now she thinks that I'm just coming against this church, and it's God, and it's all that she knows, and it's people that she loves. And how could I do this? And at the same time, these are people that I love too.
Right.
And this was my church too. So in doing this, I've lost all of them as well.
Yeah. And just for the audience, that in terms of time frame, that this is all very fresh and quite new for Amanda in terms of this kind of break, which we can talk a little bit more about, Amanda. But as you said, part of the purpose of speaking about this now is really from a whistleblower standpoint, and because of the lack of access that's happening with your daughter. And also,
it just became so real to me that when they began to hide my child, and I had just started doing some research into cults and just reading some stuff, are we, because we're not the drink the Kool-Aid, go kill yourself kind of people, we're not in the backwoods and all farm living. And so to be so prominent and in the city of Moore and having our dinner theater and people knowing us, it was we couldn't have been a cult like that.
Right.
But when I started reading about it and all the things, that the characteristics of a cult, we were 99% of them, all of those. I'm oh my God, that's us. Oh my God. And it just became, and then it talked about when you come against them, and if you start to attack them and it interferes with their money, or, is really starting to cause damage to them, that they can be very evil to the point of turning your family against you. And I can remember in that very moment when I read that, tears just started coming down my face, because it was at that moment exactly what I was experiencing when they were trying to hide Zoe from me. And so it became so real, oh my gosh, this really is real. This is really what I'm up against. And then, so as I spoke out, and the anger because of the pain that was being inflicted caused me to keep speaking out, because something had to be done. This, I can't be the only one that sees this. Somebody else got to see that this isn't okay.
Yeah.
These people know me. They know that I love my daughter. They know that I've always loved her, and I've done everything I can for her. My mom has been my rock, my best friend, my everything, my whole life. How could you do that? Because I don't agree with you, Tim. You took everything. Yeah. And then now y'all are filing falsified VPOs against me, taking me through court to try to silence me and to discredit me. And because it wasn't graded on the first VPO that they tried to file a false report on, she turned around because I got an attorney and got it a continuance so that we could get video camera footage and all of that, because I'm going to prove that she lied about this VPO. Since it got postponed, she falsified another document and filed a VPO for an emergency order to get put in place. And it's like, when is enough enough? And I don't even want to talk to this lady. I don't care to see you. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to expose your husband. And you too, because you're right along there with him. But my whole fight's been against Timothy Vanover, not even about her. And she's the one filing VPO saying that I've raised my hand to hit her, that I stalked her at a local retail store that I happen to go to do an Amazon return for Kohl's that I go to probably, once a week. And they happen to be there shopping. Of all times, out of all the days, like, I ran into them, and I haven't ran into them ever. And so she said that I was stalking her at Kohl's. When I ran into her, I waited for them outside in the foyer area. I didn't cause a scene. I had to gain composure and get myself together because it caught me completely off guard. I was more of a scared kid, because trying to talk to these people, you just never know what you're going to get or what they're going to say, or I didn't know. And so I waited to talk to them, and Jennifer was as fake as ever, telling me how much she loved me and that she never spoke bad about me and how much she respected me. And she couldn't answer the question of why they banned me from my church that I went to my whole life because I said something bad about Tim. My daughter ministers, she sings, she's on the praise team, she preaches, she's in the dinner theater shows. So now I can't see my daughter do anything. And that's her whole life. I get 2 hours a week with her right now. And I want more for my daughter than what my brother had, what all of us youth had there growing up. I want her to have an opportunity. There's kids turning down full ride scholarships there right now because God has called them to the ministry. And I won't have it with my daughter. She is bright. She is smart. She's talented. She's got an amazing head on her shoulders. She's got the future and the world at her feet. And she'll give it all up and devote it to that church if nothing's done. But I can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Here we are. And Amanda, I know that so many people listening, that their hearts are just going out to you, and certainly other parents in particular, or spouses, who have experienced similar things of just, this schism and desire to have your family member back. It is just, it's such an unbearable torture, and it's so hard it's so confusing because it's hard to even know what to do, especially when the child is the age that your daughter's at, Yeah,
because she's got a mind of her own, this is her whole life. And I think about how I was when I was her age, and you couldn't have told me any different either, you could have, and I would have probably, I was a little bit more of a rebel than she is. But still, I wouldn't have spoke against them. There was a lot of things I doubted. I mean, I can remember being over at his house, staying the night, because I was friends with his stepdaughter. And so I would stay the night with her. And I can remember him and the ministers sitting at the table late nights talking about people. And specifically, it was one of our pastor now, it was his girlfriend at the time. They were talking about her. And then we go into service the next day, and Tim gives her a prophecy. And he says that he hasn't spoke to anybody or heard this from anyone, that this is from God, and this is what God is telling him right now. It was the whole conversation they had the night before at the dinner table. And that was where I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. And I lost my belief in prophecy. It was just, y'all are making up whatever's convenient, whatever y'all need. Y'all prophesied for people to leave their wives and for people to leave their husbands. And, God, that's not God. It's not what God's sitting here ministering to people about. The amount of families and the the amount of destruction that has been left in the wake of him is just unimaginable. There are so many families, myself and many others included, that have another one of the people that have left the church still have, a kid at the church as well that's an older one. One's 19 and one's 17.
Yeah.
And they won't have anything to do with them either, and they won't talk to them and so it's caused a lot of hurt, and they're turning people, all the members of our congregation, they're preaching messages now saying that unequally yoked means not being associated with those who do not believe in the same vision as RFC. And so now it's not with just unbelievers. It is now with people that do not believe in the same vision. And so this cuts them and locks them into this little circle to where they don't associate with anybody else but themselves. Tim's preaching, it's not about bringing people into the church. It's about getting the ones in the church committed. Like, these are the things that are being preached right now that we've never been taught. We were taught to bring people in. We're here to minister and bring in the lost souls. And now you're standing, and I've got a clip of you standing on the pulpit preaching, saying, that's where the confusion is. We're not here to try to bring in people and fill up the pews. We're here to get the ones in the pews committed.
And Amanda, approximately how many people are really committed in the church, and then maybe kind of an extended number of members?
He's probably got about 25 really committed, dedicated 25 to 30 inner city, like inner dedicated, and maybe 40 altogether, just 40 to 50 maybe members.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And then about how many would you say?
Really, he's left with just the MITs now. Most of these people have, once I started speaking out, a lot of people had left the church, actually. People that I would have never imagined, retired military, older people that I respect and that I, had no other reason to leave, but because they truly saw what I was saying and they saw it.
Nice. So you've got that support of some validation from others that they've also seen the same. And I know you mentioned to me also that you've connected with others who have stated that they would be willing to speak out as well.
Yes.
Which I'm so glad that you have that support system, if and when things move into kind of legal proceedings. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of support. Like I said, he lost literally half his congregation. The only people he's got left are like those inner MIT people, and they have MITs as ministers in training, is what he calls it now, or ministers intensified training. And it's for like 5 hours once a week. And you're in a room with Tim and he's teaching. And, that's where that's why I call it their brainwashing sessions, because it's just that one-on-one, and he can tell them anything. They have signed contracts to be in this class that they cannot talk about what's going on in this class. They have to ask permission to date, to get married, to go on vacation, to miss service. And my 16-year-old daughter at the time was asked to sign and made to sign this MIT contract. And I was unaware of it. I did not okay this contract. And I've never even seen what the contract actually says, just what people have said.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, it's but that's his way of like putting that power and that using God for that tool of manipulation and preying on people. And it's the weak and the vulnerable, people that have been molested and raped and abused and drug addicts that, these are the people that he has preyed upon and made them feel like that they don't have any other option. This is, and a lot of these people don't have any family outside this church. They don't have friends. They don't go hang out with anybody else. This is it. If RFC was gone, I don't know what a lot of those people would do with their lives.
Yeah.
Because they've alienated. That's all it is the church.
Yeah. Yeah. And Amanda, did you want to say what RFC represents?
Revival for Christ Club. It's the name of the ministry.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he also, the Yellow Rose Dinner Theater is the dinner theater that is ran by him as well.
Yeah. Oh, Amanda. Well, my heart just goes out to you and to your daughter and to your mom, and to those who are in it and kind of under that control and manipulation right now, So
people like the one I was talking to that I said was very strong-willed, like there's rumor that there's more to it. There's financial ties to it. I think, Tim might be helping out with finances with some of them. paying some of their bills. Some of them can't work, and so he pays their bills, and that's, their loyalty to him, and that's why they won't leave. Other than that, like, I don't understand how these people don't see. Like, literally, the man pulls up and people are standing outside to greet him, to grab his briefcase, to grab his jacket when he walks into the church. Like, I mean, hold his hand and help him up the stairs, follow him into the bathroom. I mean, I don't know if they're wiping his butt too, but I mean, this man does nothing for himself. He would have people he called to go take his kids their stuff if they forgot it for football. Like, going to a grocery store, never. I couldn't believe I saw him at Kohl's.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And may I ask, how old is he now, approximately?
62, 63.
Okay. I was kind of getting a gauge on, how many more years this might be extended.
God, I hope none after this year. I need my daughter. I need her to just to see it for what it is, that it's not her carnal mind. It's not her flesh. It's the good brain that God gave you to discern between what's right and what's wrong. Right. And I know that's a very blurred line at that church when it comes to our beliefs of what's right and wrong and what's really right and wrong.
Well, it's really tough too, because even the goodness in your daughter would connect to the moments where the love is real or the love is moving, and would want to be aligned with that. So then it's very hard to compute anything negative going on, right? And there are all these ways that each one in the church has been given to speak to themselves internally, to self-correct after having any sort of questions or doubts or negative thoughts about anything having to do with the church. So likely she's kind of, in that loop. And yet what I hear you saying, and certainly what I see for her, as you said, she's so vibrant and creative and has so much potential. And so there's a whole world out here for her that can provide beyond, what she's experiencing now.
And tell her, my baby, you can go to any church and sing and dance and minister. Like, God is everywhere. He loves all of us. I mean, I told her, I said, I don't know what you guys are getting, like the fast pass to heaven or something for this like extra devotion. I don't understand. What makes you guys so elite? And what do you guys get special that the other people don't? Y'all are the only ones that get to go to heaven? Like, I don't understand. Please help me. Yeah. Because I can't comprehend a God that would be okay with a mother not being able to be a part of her daughter's life, for her not to be able to see her and talk to her, for her to think that I'm a bad person because I don't believe in this church. Because I love God. That's never changed. I just don't want to be in that church. I don't want to devote my life to this man that uses people for his gain and glory. I don't want any part of it.
Well, and that's why you're now using the amazing voice and mind and heart that you have to speak in the way that you feel so moved, and Amanda, that takes, I know how much that takes. I know that it's a strain and a drain and, a real, I just wanted to say, Amanda, that I really see like your strength and your love and everything shining through to really move things to a new place. And so our wishes of all the goodness to come for you and your family.
I really appreciate that. This has been a lot, but I figure at this point, I ain't got much else to lose. So save anybody else from having to go through this in the future, even if it's just one family or one mom or, anyone to get involved, to devote their life to this. And it was worth it. So.
Yes. Well, thank you, Amanda. I so appreciate this time with you.
I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me very much. Thank you.
We so hope that you enjoyed this episode, and please stay tuned for part of Leaving the Cult, the season 2 song written by Jaya Suri. And for all things related to Jaya, her music, ways that you can support her, check out the show notes.